The Black Doctors podcast highlights the stories of minority professionals with the goal of inspiring others. Season 2 provides more episodes and features a wider variety of professions. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and share with others, because the next generation can't be what they don't see. Tune in every Monday to hear our stories told by us.
Welcome back to this week's episode of the Black Doctors podcast. This week, I'm privileged to be talking with Dr. Ed McDonald. He's a gastroenterologist. He's an academic clinician at the University of Chicago Medical Center. Dr. McDonald, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me, man. It's good to talk to you as usual. I miss having you around the university, man. Your presence is definitely missed, man.
Yeah, definitely miss being up in Chi-Town.
So let's get into it.
Ed, what is a typical day like for you as a gastroenterologist?
So it depends on the day. So first and foremost, my responsibilities are different than your typical gastroenterologist, primarily because I'm a gastroenterologist who specializes in not only general gastroenterology, but also clinical nutrition, and I also specialize in weight management. So I have 3 separate clinics. I do different types of endoscopy, dealing with nutrition, with regular GI stuff. But on any given day, I typically will have either full-day procedures or half-day procedures and a half-day clinic. And my clinics are going to vary depending on what type of clinic it is. So I have a half-day of general gastroenterology clinic where it's mostly, diarrhea, constipation, bloating, abdominal pain, acid reflux, heartburn, etc., some Crohn's disease in there. Then my nutrition clinic, which is really a sick clinic. I mean, it's a population of people who are very ill. So a lot of people who have malnutrition. I should call it a malnutrition clinic. Mm-hmm. So these are folks who can't eat the traditional way because they're not absorbing, because the line of their bowel is unhealthy for a variety of different reasons. That can be from Crohn's disease, and some of the patients who've had bone marrow transplants, graft versus host disease. I have a lot of people who have cancer. So these are folks who may even have end-stage cancer, where the cancer has caused a chronic small bowel obstruction. So we have to give them IV nutrition. Then I have a lot of patients, unfortunately, who have been victim of gunshot wounds and gunshot trauma. So they may have fistulas and other reasons where they can't eat the traditional way. So I have to focus on them. Then there's people with anorexia and just severe malnutrition because of psychological issues. Then I have my obesity clinic, which is the opposite. It's people really trying to lose weight,
right?
As opposed to people trying to gain weight. And during my procedure days, my procedures could be just regular screening colonoscopies where we're trying to identify cancer and or prevent cancer by identifying polyps and removing them so they never have the opportunity to develop a cancer. And for your listeners who are not aware of what a polyp is, that's a precancerous growth that over time can turn into cancer, but it is not exactly cancer. So you can remove it before it actually converts into a cancer. So I do those. Then I may have procedures where we're putting in feeding tubes in the stomach or feeding tubes in the small intestine, or there are people whose esophagus may be narrowed, and we have to use balloons to kind of open up the narrowing so people can eat again. Or I see a lot of people who've had bariatric surgeries where they may have had some narrowing at the connection points where they've had the surgeries and their bowel has been reconnected, and we have to use balloons to open up those areas. So it's a lot of complicated stuff. And then if you're on the inpatient service, you're seeing a lot of people who have internal bleeding. So these are people who are bleeding from, ulcers, from blood vessels that can bleed inside the intestines or stomach or colon, or people who may have a tumor that's bleeding, and we have to figure out how to stop any potential sources of bleeding. So I feel like as a gastroenterologist, especially as someone who focuses on nutrition, we do a lot of complicated stuff. Yeah. And with our nutrition focus, we also focus on small bowel diseases. So most gastroenterologists don't deal with any procedures where they're getting deep into the small bowel. So I'm one of the few people in the state of Illinois that actually can do procedures where we get deeper in the small bowel. So that puts me in close relationships with a lot of surgeons. So at University of Chicago, I work with a lot of pretty much all the bariatric surgeons, and oftentimes if someone has a small bowel tumor, they may call me and have me just go up to the OR and help them identify where the tumor is.
Wow.
And, we'll do a procedure where I'm doing endoscopy and they're doing laparoscopy, and we're working together at the same time. And it's, for me as a non-surgeon, being in the OR with surgeons while they're doing surgery and me telling the surgeons what to do, it's a good feeling, especially having gone through medical school and been in the OR.
Right.
And, you have everybody yelling at you when you're a medical student and you're trying to suture or cut the sutures, and they're like, too short, too long. It's
payback.
Yeah, it's payback. And I tell people, like, look, man, do this, move your, trocar this way. And like, I want you to do this. And it's good to, for someone, I think one of the benefits or the beauty of being a gastroenterologist is like we're one of the closest things to surgery that's not surgery.
Yeah.
So I still get, my taste for surgery satisfied without actually having to live the rigorous lifestyle that sometimes can be associated with surgery.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I definitely had no idea that was all encompassed in the field of gastroenterology. So you practice in primarily an academic model. How would that differ from practicing in private practice as a gastroenterologist?
Yeah, so I mean, at University of Chicago, one patient population, it may be a little bit different. So at a tertiary care center like University of Chicago that has a particular focus on cancer, I see a lot of cancer, a lot of it. And we're also a level 1 trauma center, so I'm going to see more gastrointestinal problems stemming from trauma, gunshots, penetrating abdominal trauma, etc. So your average private practice gastroenterologist is probably not going to have that acuity of patients to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
So most private practice, and in private practice, you're not going to focus on nutrition. That's really just an academic thing for the most part. So your private practice, they're pretty much just going to be doing general gastroenterology, which is mostly abdominal pain, maybe some Crohn's disease. And some of the private practice docs, since they do general gastroenterology, they also function as hepatologists. So for me, I get to be a little bit more specialized. Like I'm still general because I want to keep my general skills up. But since we have academic hepatologists, like I'm not treating hepatitis C and doing stuff like that. Whereas a private practice gastroenterologist may have to do some of that.
Okay.
With Crohn's disease and some of the advanced inflammatory bowel disease, we have inflammatory bowel disease specialists. So for a lot of those patients, I don't necessarily have to be the one that's treating inflammatory bowel disease. Whereas a primary gastroenterologist in private practice, they're kind of a jack of all trades and they're doing all the above. When people get really, really sick, that's when they start to send patients to a tertiary care center or academic center where I work.
Right. No, that's awesome. And since, you could choose to work pretty much anywhere you want it with your skill set, but you've chosen to work at an academic hospital in the Southside of Chicago. What does that patient population mean to you? Why are you there?
Great question. So one, I am a Southsider. I was born in Chicago. I live on the South Side. So working in the same neighborhood in which I live has its own set of advantages. I mean, one, it makes for an easy commute. So that's less time that I have to spend in the car and more time I can spend with the family, or even I ride my bike to work. So, I mean, just the health benefits alone of just being able to ride your bike to work is important, and I'm willing to stay here for that alone. That's a reason that I would consider just definitely staying on the South Side. But ultimately, when I think about some of the reasons why I became a gastroenterologist, health disparities is one of them. And we clearly know that there's health disparities when it comes to both the incidence and mortality related to colorectal cancer. So in Chicago specifically, African Americans in Chicago have two times the rate of death from colon cancer is 2 times higher in African Americans than it is in non-Hispanic white people, white Chicagoans.
Wow.
So that is something that growing up in Chicago, like I didn't necessarily know the epidemiology, but I knew people who had colon cancer. I mean, going to church, you hear about everyone sick and sudden with colon cancer. So as a physician, knowing that epidemiology is not surprising. Like I saw this growing up. And since Chicago is a relatively segregated city, the majority of the African American population is going to be on the south side and certain neighborhoods on the west side. So for me, being in one of the few black male academic gastroenterologists in the city that has higher rates of black men having colon cancer, being on the south side makes sense. So I get to impact my community, and I feel like on the south side of Chicago, at the University of Chicago, that gives me it puts me in a better position to really be the impact that I want to be.
I think it's absolutely incredible, and thank you for your service. Thank you for the work that you're doing on the south side of Chicago.
And people, it means a lot. So like when I go to the grocery store and I go to Mariano's, I'll just walk into the grocery store, even the Whole Foods over here on the south side.
Yeah.
And when I walk in and just randomly see people that I've done colonoscopies on, I'm just picking out vegetables, and people come up to me like, "Hey, Dr. McDonald, you could have did my colonoscopy." To me, that means something. Or pre-pandemic, if I go visit a church or something like that, and the pastor's just like, "Hey, Dr. McDonald walked in. He did my colonoscopy," and the pastor will talk about why you need to get colon cancer screening. So I appreciate being in that position.
Yeah.
And if I was working, in the suburbs somewhere, where the population may not necessarily really appreciate my importance and my value as a black male gastroenterologist, like it wouldn't be the same.
Right.
But here, I feel like I'm needed and appreciated.
That's amazing. And speaking on health disparities in the black community with colon cancer, obviously we just lost one of our greats in Chadwick Boseman. And one of your posts really struck me because you wrote 2 years ago, you wrote the article, 6 Reasons Why Colon Cancer Doesn't Exist in Wakanda. And I mean, incorporating that into this message of public health. Since then, you've collaborated with other black gastroenterologists and other gastroenterologists, Dr. Nkedia and Dr. Gray as well, to kind of raise awareness about this disease that's affecting the black community. What would you tell the public, and what would you have us tell our family and friends about colon cancer and what we need to do to avoid this disease?
Yeah, so it's a timely topic, and I feel like I'm still in mourning. I mean, I was a big fan of Chadwick Boseman. I mean, ever since I first saw him in the movie 42 and his subsequent movies, it seemed like he came out with a profound movie almost like every year since 42 came out. So he was, pretty much becoming my favorite actor. And almost like instantly when I saw him, like, man, this guy there's something special about him. So when I saw that he passed away, it hurt. I mean, we've seen a lot of celebrities pass on, and some, their impact or their loss is more significant. I feel like he's one of those people where this loss is particularly hurtful.
Yeah.
And when I think about specifically with the black community, I mean, in the past 15 years, I feel like the two things that I think were most celebrated amongst black people were Barack Obama's election and when the movie Black Panther came out.
Yep.
Like, I've never seen, folks go to the movie theaters dressed up in dashikis and stuff like this.
We were there.
Like I never seen it before. So there was something particularly special about him and that movie. So when the movie came out, I wrote a post about colon cancer. So it came out in March, same month as Colon Cancer Awareness Month, and I decided, when you're doing community outreach and you're trying to reach a community, you have to sometimes think outside the box in terms of how do you make messages stick, how do you make messages resonate in a way that's different than just saying, colon cancer, has higher rates in this community, and this is a colonoscopy. So I was trying to figure out a way to get creative yet still effectively convey a message.
Right.
And I thought about using the movie that obviously was very popular as a way to convey that message. And, at that time, I don't know if you remember, there was a hashtag like in Wakanda.
Yeah.
And everyone's doing Wakanda forever. But like in Wakanda hashtag, people were using Wakanda as almost a metaphor for this idyllic black life,
Utopia.
a utopia. You know what I mean? It's this utopian vision. And in my mind, if you think about utopia, like health disparities would not exist in a utopia.
Right.
And you take it a step further, it's just like, well, I don't think we would have as much colon cancer in Wakanda. So like my hashtag in Wakanda is not a whole lot of colon cancer.
Yeah.
And then I, flushed those ideas out. So one of the reasons why I thought there wouldn't be a lot of colon cancer in Wakanda, and I wrote this not knowing that the brother Chadwick had colon cancer as he made that movie.
Man.
Like he had colon cancer then, and I had no idea. Like who would have thought? But in the spirit of the movie, I thought there wouldn't be any colon cancer in Wakanda, primarily because, one, people in Wakanda seem like they knew their family history. So if you look at Chadwick Boseman and Black Panther, I mean, they knew all the Panthers for generations.
Right. Yeah.
And I feel like if one of the Black Panthers had colon cancer, somebody would have known that, and people would have been screened appropriately. Whereas in America, we may not necessarily be as forthcoming when it comes to sharing our family history with our family members. A lot of times people can be very secretive, and, people aren't necessarily sharing their business, or, people aren't really talking about their colonoscopies with their brothers, sisters, or the parents may not be having that conversation with their children. And it is important because our family history can impact the age in which we should start having colon cancer screening. And I feel like in Wakanda, they would have been aware of that.
Right.
And another reason why I thought there was less colon cancer in Wakanda compared to America is that in Wakanda, it seemed like they were mostly vegetarians. So I think there was a scene where the quote unquote colonizer was in the mountains, and they were like, "Are you going to eat me?" And he made a joke like, "Man, we're mostly vegetarian."
Yeah.
So we know that eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables, specifically a diet that's high in fiber, typically has been associated with a decreased risk of colon cancer, whereas a diet rich in red meat and ultra-processed meats, and maybe even ultra-processed foods, can be associated with an increased risk in developing colon cancer. So I feel like the average diet in Wakanda is probably going to be healthier than the average standard American diet that we have.
Yeah.
Therefore, the risk for developing colon cancer, in theory, should be lower. So another reason why colon cancer is going to be less in Wakanda is people exercise. So you look at the Dora Milaje. I mean, look.
Yeah.
Everyone in Wakanda look like they have been, either working out or living a lifestyle where there's just a lot of physical activity within their daily lifestyle. Like, I didn't see anyone who was markedly overweight in Wakanda. At least, obviously this is Hollywood.
Forrest Whitaker was a little chubby, but that's about it.
Forrest Whitaker, right. But, he's been taking care of the plants and everything. And Forrest Whitaker, he played an older brother.
Yeah.
And plus, Forrest Whitaker, Forrest Whitaker spent much of his time in America.
Touche. There you go.
So, if anything, Forrest Whitaker probably would have been the main culprit for colon cancer,
right,
primarily because of the time he spent in America, where he was exposed to the standard American diet. But nonetheless, in Wakanda, most people seem like they were in shape. And we know that maintaining a healthy body weight can be associated with decreased risk of developing colon cancer. Another reason why I thought colon cancer was going to be less common in Wakanda is people weren't smoking. Like, I didn't see anyone smoking in Wakanda. I mean, could you imagine? There's a fight scene with Black Panther and somebody takes a cigarette break. Like, wouldn't make sense.
Right.
And then plus, in general in Africa, people don't smoke as many cigarettes as they do in other continents. So probably not going to have a whole lot of cigarettes in Wakanda. And plus, they were isolated from the Western world. So it's not like they're importing tobacco and whatnot. So we know that cigarettes can definitely increase the risk of not only colon cancer, but cancer in general and chronic disease in general. So that's one reason why there's less colon cancer in Wakanda. Uh, Other reasons, some of the obvious is that they embrace technology in Wakanda. So with healthcare in general in Wakanda, it seems like it's light years ahead of whatever we have in the United States.
Right.
But what we do have in the United States, we have technology that can help decrease our risk of developing colon cancer. So as a gastroenterologist, I get to use a lot of the technology. I mean, I'm doing colonoscopies. I'm using fiber optic cameras to decrease the risk of developing colon cancer that I look inside of people. I mean, if you brought somebody from like 200 years in the past and brought them
Right.
today, and they would see what I'm doing with colonoscopies and everything, it would look like magic. Like, wait, what is going on? So I feel like in Wakanda, the average person would embrace technology that exists to decrease their risk of illness. Now,
Yeah.
United States, we're still trying to, encourage people to embrace the technology that we do have. And I get the reasons why we have to encourage people to utilize that technology. I mean, one, there's lack of access. So the technology that we have is not universally accessible for a lot of different reasons, due to insurance, due to financial reasons. There's transportation stuff, and there's a lot of stuff. Then there's medical mistrust, which I understand. I mean, in communities of color, we have the history of medicine for communities of color in the United States. It is not the prettiest history.
Not at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's terrible. Have you read Medical Apartheid?
Oh, yeah.
It's bad. It's sad stuff, man. So the distrust and mistrust that exists, there are a lot of reasonable reasons behind it, but we still have to figure out ways to take advantage of what we do have. So, like, these are obstacles that we're dealing with in order to get people to utilize the technology that we have. But I felt like in Wakanda, you wouldn't have those obstacles.
Yeah. Well, I mean, once again, thank you for all that you're doing, and rest in peace to our brother Chadwick. But it's great that the awareness that is coming out of this is definitely going to save lives.
Yeah. I mean, if there is any silver lining to a tragedy, making people aware of colon cancer and getting people to get screened. I mean, even if it's just one person who we can prevent a cancer in, that's a step in the right direction. That's turning a tragedy, and really just trying to not let the tragedy just exist as a tragedy by itself. Like, how do we utilize what happened to him in a way to prevent it from happening to somebody else?
Absolutely. Oh, man. On to, I guess, a more positive subject. How does it feel, Dr. McDonald, to be married to a celebrity?
It feels good.
For those of you that don't know, Dr. Everywoman is married to Ed. She is an obstetrician and gynecologist who also practices in the Chicagoland area, and she does a lot of meducation videos and parodies, gone viral multiple times. So how does that work for the two of you? You guys collaborate on projects?
Yeah. So oftentimes, I mean, I don't want to take any credit away from my wife. What she does is amazing, and she may ask me to come up with some ideas periodically, and I may say like, hey, since I have a background being a DJ and knowing hip hop and a lot of music and whatnot, like I might say like, look, you should do X, Y, and Z song, and if I was doing a parody of this song, I would say something like this. I may throw out like one bar or one line, and then she'll take it and do the rest. And that's only here and there. So I don't even want to take credit for any of her songs.
Right.
I may try to come up with some ideas with her periodically. And then depending on what she's trying to do, she'll have me do some of the recording and audio engineering. And if she wants to do an original song, kind of like kind of like what you do. Like I have enough equipment and musical know-how to recreate certain songs.
Yeah.
So I'll do the production and do the beats and, hop on the keys, the bass guitar and the drum machine and, put everything together.
There you go. The ultimate power couple.
We have a busy household.
And how has music influenced your career?
It has influenced my career a lot. So, I mean, once upon a time, I was an Albert Schweitzer Fellow. And the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship is a community service fellowship for community-oriented projects for health professionals. And the project that I had was actually using music as a way for health promotion. So I did this as a medical student. What I did was, my goal was to train local hip-hop artists and spoken word poets as health educators.
Really?
Yeah. So I recruited a bunch of poets and hip-hop artists that I had connections from my years of DJing in the past. Once upon a time, I was actually a pretty decent DJ. I still got some skills. I'm rusty. I have not DJ'd in many years, but so what I was doing with that project, in order to find a venue to have my artists come in and do songs and whatnot, I actually had to DJ for free. So I told these places, I'm like, look, man, I'll be your free DJ if you just let me have people come in and, do these performances. Wow. And that was agreement. So I would basically train different artists on a healthcare topic, and they would take the information that they learned in my trainings and basically convert it into songs and then come in and actually do the performances.
Wow.
So, matter of fact, see, people don't know the backstory. So my wife, when she was a resident, she wasn't really doing any performances or doing anything. And she said she could write a poem on breast cancer. She wanted to perform it. And I'm like, why don't you come through and perform the song on breast cancer? And that was the first time she ever used any music or any poem or anything to actually educate someone.
Wow.
Yeah, true story.
It's crazy. I mean, music and the arts really do connect everyone, and they're such a great medium for education.
Yeah. So for me, I support her and what she does. And then occasionally if I do my own little educational stuff on Instagram or, social media, like I put my own music to it. But ultimately what I love about music, I love it as a form of stress relief. When I sit down at the piano or when I sit down on my drum machines, it's for me, it's almost a form of meditation. Like I am literally not thinking about anything else. I can go to work and see people dealing with all types of horrendous conditions. I mean, literally at work, a lot of my time is spent with people who've been shot, people with metastatic cancer, people with, severe illness that is, you're really exposed to a lot of suffering, so to speak. And I mean, I like being the person to help people through the suffering, but sometimes it's a lot of suffering that you're exposed to. Yeah. And in order to keep yourself balanced, you need to have some sort of healthy outlets. So for me, when I come home and play music and make my own music specifically, like I'm not thinking about anything other than, okay, even if I'm just practicing scales, like I'm just, let me just practice scales, and that's all I'm thinking about. If I'm, making my own song, I'm, just focusing on the chord progression.
Yeah.
So for me, when I start thinking about that, I'm not thinking about anything. I'm just thinking about the music.
Yeah. And in the zone.
In the zone. And it's like meditation. So a lot of meditation, they tell you to clear your mind and just, just kind of empty your thoughts and whatnot. And I feel like with music, it takes me to that zone where my mind is clear.
Ed, can you take us through your, educational pedigree? You went to medical school at Northwestern. Just take it from there and let us know, where you trained and.
Gotcha. So first and foremost, I went to the University of Michigan for college. I would be remiss if I did not mention the University of Michigan Go Blue. So that was my foundation, and I love Michigan. I love that college experience that I had, and I also had some good research opportunities and some mentors, and met a lot of wonderful people who I'm friends with to this day. A lot of Detroiters. So Detroit, great city, got nothing but love for Detroit. Then I went to Northwestern for medical school. So, it's interesting. I actually had a full scholarship to go to Michigan for medical school.
Wow.
And, but my parents got divorced the year in which I graduated, and my mom had some health conditions. So I had to come back to Chicago. Now, thankfully, I had options where I could just be like, well, I'm just going to go to Chicago for medical school. But I went to Northwestern. So I got accepted to Northwestern and went to Northwestern. Um, did my med school there. And in between my third and fourth year of medical school, I started to become interested in GI. And I actually took a year off of medical school and did a year at the NIH in basic science.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I was working in labs. To this day, I could do immunohistochemistry and Western blots like with the best of them. I was at the NIH and came back, finished up my fourth year medical school, and ended up matching. It's interesting. And so I actually had a terrible experience in my sub-I. And so after finishing my year at the basic science, came back and I matched. My first rotation was my sub-I. And the resident I was with, she was like the worst person ever. It was like, one of those horror stories in medicine where
no
she
way.
would actively. Oh, it was terrible. I mean, she would actively try to sabotage me and like lie to the attending and stuff like that. It was terrible. It got to the point where during my sub-I, we didn't speak for the last 4 weeks. This is like a 6-week sub-I. So I mean, I was a good enough medical student where I can just be like, look, I saw this person, admitted them, orders in, just co-sign the bad boys, done.
Man.
So that was my sub-I experience. But after that, I was like, man, I don't know if I want to do medicine. I'm going to apply ER. So I hurriedly put together an ER application and I applied ER and medicine. It was like a big deal because the program director at Northwestern, she knew, like, I was very vocal about how negative my experience was with this resident.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody knew that I was not going to be a gastroenterologist because this one negative experience.
Wow.
I ended up interviewing for both ER and medicine programs, and I had a relationship with the chief of GI at Northwestern. I did some research in his lab. For me, I knew I wanted to be a gastroenterologist if I went into medicine. I knew if I wasn't a gastroenterologist, I would rather just be an ER doctor. So I ranked Northwestern medicine number one, which I felt that was my best chance in getting into gastroenterology. And the rest of my programs were all ER.
Wow.
So obviously I matched at Northwestern and did my residency there and had a great experience as a resident. So it's funny, like my sub-I experience had nothing to do with what I actually experienced throughout residency. After finishing up at Northwestern, I knew I wanted to do gastroenterology, but at that time, I applied to gastroenterology as a third year resident. If you applied at that time, you couldn't go straight into fellowship. You had to have wait a year before you could start your fellowship. So instead of doing a like a hospitalist year or, doing research again, I decided to do a fellowship in nutrition. So I was already interested in nutrition. A lot of it was health disparities, but a lot of it also was, I remember seeing super sick patients that had nutritional issues. Like both of those reasons put me down a nutrition path. So as a resident, I had a clinic at the Jesse Brown VA, and I remember I would see brothers coming in with diabetes, high blood pressure, strokes, and everything. I would look over their chart and see, all the residents who took care of them before me. All they did was just increase their blood pressure medications or increase their insulin, but no one really asked them what type of foods they were eating. And I remember seeing one guy in particular who was just eating hot dogs every single day, every meal.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and I mean the brother had erectile dysfunction, just got divorced, and he couldn't really cook anything. He had diabetes, he had high blood pressure, he was overweight, and he was just eating hot dogs. So I gave him some recipes. I literally wrote down recipes on the back of a paper towel, in the clinic, and I had him roasting vegetables and stuff like that. And so he stopped doing the hot dogs. I see the guy maybe 3 months later, and he lost a whole bunch of weight. His blood pressure was a little bit down. I'm like, man, what are you eating? And he's just like, man, I'm just doing those roasted vegetables.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did it fix his erectile dysfunction?
It did. Like he was not calling me in the middle of the night for Cialis and whatnot. Which so I was this idealistic, black intern, and I gave everybody my pager number and my cell phone number. I'm like, I want my patients to reach out to me, to call me, and get in contact with me.
Mm-hmm.
And look, man, like brothers would literally calling me in the middle of the night for Viagra and Cialis, like that. I'm like, well, it is 2 a.m, but I get it. You're with your old lady, so to speak.
Right.
So I saw the power that food had in his life, and then simultaneously, when I was on my GI rotation, we had someone who had short bowel syndrome, and this person had, I mean, they were malnourished. They weighed like 80 pounds. They were having bowel movements like 20 times a day. Their electrolytes were all messed up. And I remember being on rounds with one of the gastroenterologists at Northwestern, who's a very well-respected gastroenterologist. I mean, like one of the best in the country. This guy was just like, you know what? I don't know what to do with this patient. I don't know anything about nutrition stuff. Next patient.
Wow.
And I mean, this person's like on the verge of dying, and he was just like, next patient. And I'm like, man, I need to learn more nutrition. So what I did was to combine the impact that I saw with giving people diets and recipes, and also the need for being more knowledgeable about clinical nutrition. I decided to do a fellowship in clinical nutrition at University of Chicago. And in the evenings, I went to culinary school. And since I'm not independently rich, I had to pay for culinary school out of pocket. And I didn't want to take on any student loans. So on the weekends, I was moonlighting.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was working extra shifts in order to pay my own tuition for culinary school. So did that. Ended up getting some publications that year. Did some oral presentations for research. I interned for the Food Network. I was one of the chefs on the Sandwich King season 3.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So if you go back and look at specifically that season, like I made all those sandwiches, man. The talent did not make those sandwiches; those were my sandwiches.
How was it behind the scenes on those shows?
Oh, it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible behind the scenes because food stylists are. I don't want to say food stylists universally are horrible people, but the food stylist I was working with was a horrible person. Whatever school that resident he gave me a hard time when I was a sub-I, they went to the same school of life. So to be a food stylist, you have to be like OCD, but it's about the way food looks. So it's one thing if you're like a surgeon in the operating room and you're OCD about you're doing like a heart transplant. You're OCD about the process of doing a heart transplant. Like I get it.
Right.
Like please be OCD about that. But if you're OCD about me toasting a sandwich.
Oh no!
It becomes an interesting conversation. So I remember, the food stylist specifically came up to me one time. She was like, "Ed, so the next recipe, this is what we're doing, and then I want the sandwich. I want it to be GBD." I'm like GBD, and I'm a physician. Like I'm like a board certified internist at this point. I'm like GBD. I'm over here thinking about like wait, gallbladder duct, like what is GBD, what are you talking about? And she's like, I want it to be golden brown and delicious. And I'm like come on now, that's not a thing. That's not a thing. So she was using acronyms. You ever look in like the medical record and you see all these crazy acronyms that know aren't like standard acronyms?
Yep.
But like somebody just wrote it in there, and just because they're trying to use shorthand, it's just like nobody knows your shorthand. Like this is not a standard acronym. So the food stylist, it was a lot of stuff like that, and I'm like, this is not standard communication. If you wanted to be golden brown, just say golden brown. Don't say GBD, and then look at me like why don't you know what GBD is? So I make the sandwich, and it's like golden brown and delicious. Next thing you know, she takes a bite out of my sandwich. And she's like, the sandwich looks great. And she takes a bite, and I'm like, well, it was for the camera. Maybe they want to have a half-bitten sandwich. I don't know what's going on. And she's like, Ed, what'd you do to the sandwich? The sandwich is so good. It's amazing. And next thing you know, she throws the sandwich on the wall.
What?
She was just like, I said golden brown and delicious. Like, you had delicious, you had golden, but it wasn't enough brown. Do it again. and I don't want to make it seem like we as physicians should deserve more respect than the average person in the world. But as a human being, like, you don't treat people like that,
Right.
like physician or not. And when she threw that sandwich, I'm just like, man, like, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. Like, I had to swallow my pride, make another sandwich, and go with the flow. But I realized, like, being the chef for television, it's not really what I'm trying to do in life. It's just not. Yeah. Jeff Morrow, who it was his show. See, Jeff Morrow's a nice guy, and we still keep in contact to this day. But the food stylist behind the scenes, it was terrible. And most people don't see the amount of work that goes on for, like, an actual TV show. So you see, a TV show like The Sandwich King or Ina Garden, and you just see, like, one person up there cooking some stuff. Like, what you don't see is there's a whole team of chefs. So the show was filmed at somebody's house. So they rented out the house, and we converted the garage into a makeshift kitchen. So they had all these burners, and we put refrigerators and, like, everything you expect in a professional kitchen. We had it in the garage. So we're making all this stuff. Like, people don't see, like, all the lights and all the cameras involved in actually filming everything. And then in between takes, like, we're cleaning stuff up nonstop to make the kitchen look spotless. It is a big ordeal. So there was probably maybe 100 people working on this one show.
Wow.
Which is just, you would think, like, oh, it's just cooking. Like, you just got one person cooking. There's literally 100 people. So it's a big affair. Now, fast forward, I did all that and ended up doing my gastroenterology fellowship at Rush. So, finished gastroenterology, and Northwestern needed someone to help out with nutrition. Rush needed somebody to help out with nutrition. But again, I wanted to come back to the Southside, and I ended up coming to work at University of Chicago. And that's where I am.
Awesome. Well, they're lucky to have you down there. As we wrap up, what would you say to medical students that are looking at different career options, possibilities? They may or may not have experienced gastroenterology, that may or may not be on their radar. What would you say to those students?
So, gastroenterology is awesome. First and foremost, I love being a gastroenterologist. I really do. I think I would have liked being an ER doctor, but I definitely love being a gastroenterologist. And what I like about it is because I do a lot of different things. And for medical students out there, I think some of the major decisions you want to make is, like, do you want to work with kids? Do you want to work with, men? Do you want to work with women? Do you want to work with both? Those are, like, do you want to work with older people? You know what I mean? Those are, like, big decisions you need to make. And then you need to decide, well, do you just want to have a clinic-based practice, or do you want to do procedures, or do you want to do both? So for me, when I went through my rotations, I was one of those people who kind of, like, liked a lot of stuff, but didn't really love anything, so to speak. So I remember, being on medicine. I didn't necessarily love being in medicine. When I did surgery, like, I like surgery. I didn't love being in the OR. Some of my classmates who ended up, being surgeons, they love that stuff. They're just, I just want to be in the OR all the time. That's all I want to do. And I'm like, well, I like it for, like, the first hour.
Right.
And then after a while, it's just like, man, this is kind of long. And, with OB-GYN, like, I liked it, but I want to see more than just women. With urology, I liked it. I want to see more than just men. And with gastroenterology, I feel like it was the perfect combination for someone who likes everything but didn't love one particular thing.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is just like, look, I get to go to the OR still. So for some people who are like, oh, you're a medical student, this is your last time to be in the OR. Not true. Not for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I go to the OR. I work with the surgeons. Like, I get to see laparoscopy and whatnot. And I do my own procedures. I'm a gastroenterologist. I'm doing stuff, and we're putting feeding tubes and certain stuff. Like, I could suture if I want to. I can, when we do our peg tubes, I got to make an incision. So that technically it's not surgery, but I have a scalpel in my hand.
Yeah, close enough.
Close enough. And if somebody's bleeding, I can suture it up. It's fine. So I feel like I'm using that skill set still, and I can still throw a one-handed nod as good as anybody.
That makes one of us.
And I get to be in the clinic. So I like being able to talk to folks about high blood pressure and diabetes and whatnot. And with my obesity clinic, I get to do as much diabetes and high blood pressure as I want. So I'm still using that internal medicine hat. And then same with my nutrition experience. Like, when you're managing IV nutrition and whatnot, I'm in the ICUs all the time. So I see, critical illness. I get to work with the ICU doctors, and even with the PEG tubes and the feeding tubes and whatnot. Like, a lot of people who need those are often critically ill. So the aspects that I liked about my internal medicine residency and the training, I still get to go to the ICU and still get to be involved in that whole critical care environment. I just don't have to do it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And with my GI clinic, I like being in clinic. I like talking to people about gastrointestinal problems and helping people feel better. Get to do that. I like my heme-onc rotations as a resident. I see a lot of people with cancer. But I don't necessarily have to be the person just, giving out chemotherapy all the time.
Right.
I get to, work in conjunction with the oncologists. I get to work in conjunction with the surgeons. And, the cardiologists, they're trying to, send me a lot of their patients to help them lose weight. So I get to work with people undergoing cardiac rehab. So for me, in what I do as a gastroenterologist, specifically as a gastroenterologist focused on nutrition, I get to experience a wider breadth of medicine, but not enough where I get bored.
Yeah. No, it's awesome.
And I also get to work with great anesthesiologists like yourself.
There we go. And hopefully we'll be working together soon in a couple years.
I look forward to it. One more thing, I do teaching. So at an academic institution, one of the benefits of being in academics and not being in private practice, which is nothing wrong with private practice, but in academics, you potentially will have the opportunity to teach trainees at all different levels. So I get to be the person giving the lectures for the first and second year medical students.
Okay.
So University of Chicago, when people learn about diarrhea and malabsorption, and I even teach in the health disparities lecture, it's me giving those lectures. Um, and I like being that person, especially as a person of color, because when I was a medical student at Northwestern, like, I didn't see black male faculty.
Right.
And I definitely, didn't see any, I didn't see black faculty for the most part, and definitely not given like hardcore lectures about, I do like the carbohydrates and the protein absorption lectures. I'm all up in the physiology. So I enjoy being that person, and I enjoy teaching the fellows, how to perform procedures. And with our nutrition fellows, I'm teaching the fellows TPN nutrition. They're coming into my obesity clinic. And, right now, our nutrition fellow is someone that you introduced me to.
Oh, yeah. Right on.
Yeah. Yeah. So you told me at Rush, they had a black fellow. And he was the last black fellow to come through since I finished the program in gastroenterology. So you got us in contact. And this is where mentorship and reaching out, I mean, you just never know where this stuff takes you.
Yeah.
But you got us in contact, and I met with him. We would go out quarterly. I'd take him out to a restaurant or a bar. We'd get drinks and just kind of catch up, make sure the brother was doing well in fellowship. And I was really a kind of source he can confide in, because training can be tough. So sometimes you just need to have somebody you can bounce some ideas off of and just run some things by. So I tried to be that person because I wish I had somebody like that when I was going through training. But in that process, he got interested in nutrition. And I'm in a position where I could be like, oh, we'll make you our nutrition fellow. And he's my nutrition fellow.
When I found out how that worked out, man, like that made my entire week. That made my month.
Yeah. I mean, you made that connection. Had it not been for you, I may not have crossed paths with him.
That's dope. Well, Ed, thanks again for coming on the show. Thanks for all the knowledge that you've shared. Where can the people find you? What are your socials? What are your blog posts, websites, all that?
Yeah, so I have my website, www.thedockskitchen. You can find me on Instagram at The Doc's Kitchen 4, and Facebook, The Doc's Kitchen. We have a podcast, Trying to Live podcast, that I do with a couple of my buddies. So you can check it out. Check us out there. I need to probably do some more episodes, but it's hard being a podcaster, man.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Like people don't know the editing and all that stuff. It takes time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a work in progress. So I got some, other stuff brewing, and you can check my wife out at Dr. Everywoman.
So Ed, thank you so much, and we'll keep an eye on what you're doing down there on the Southside of Chicago.
Appreciate that, man.
The Black Doctors Podcast is a nonprofit, volunteer passion project with the goal of inspiring all who listen. Tune in next week for another episode of the Black Doctors Podcast with Dr. Stephen Bradley, your friendly neighborhood anesthesiologist.